Hello, good morning, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are listening to Dem Radio. You can always listen to us at demradio.com/live. You can always get beautiful podcast versions of all the content on this wonderful station. If you just go to demradio.com/podcast. Now, if you just like to get international flavor, you can do that at internationalflavor.com. You can do Civic Outlaws at civicoutlaws.com/podcast. And that is the name of that tune. So, I got a list of things to talk about. I watched an interview, well, not an interview, press conference of Pashinyan, who's the leader of Azerbaijan, and Armenia. Sorry, they were talking about Azerbaijan. So he's from Armenia, and Vladimir Putin. And it was kind of an interesting back and forth how this is you don't see it all too often, but this one was two very gifted politicians. This is how do I want to put this? This is a professional fight. This is a professional boxing match, right? And it's not calling people names. It's not, you're an idiot. It's none of that. This was smooth on both sides and pretty subtle. And both of them telling Putin, saying, well, you're really screwing up. And the Armenian guy, I got it here, but I've switched screens and I can't remember his name and I don't want to mispronounce it. And so he pushed right back and it was a good impact. And then I've got a couple other things that I've gone through over the evening, but I was hit by something else this morning and getting prepared. And this kind of jumped right the hell out at me. And this was on the Hill, and I don't think I can get the entire story of it. I wonder if it'll let me, if it makes you log in to get the whole, you got to register to get the whole thing. You don't get the whole, you don't get the entire story until you become a member, until several days later. But the basics of it are as this. There was a leak in the Supreme Court, and that it comes up with some more ammunition. And here, there's a video on it from Fox News. I'm not going to play it, but there are leaked memos in the Supreme Court, and the Hill is who put it out, but I don't have a membership, and I'm not going to do it right now. I might do it eventually, but I'm not going to do it until it actually, you got to sign up to get it. A bunch of a-holes. But you can't even get the entire story. So I'm going to give you the summarized version, but basically what it's saying, and it was on TV earlier. I saw it, didn't record it. Don't want to go look for one right now because my stuff is all there. And we have internal memos from 2016 leaked to the New York Times reveal that Supreme Court justices, led by Chief Justice John Roberts, maneuvered to block President Obama's environmental regulations. Now, this is court activism, okay? Fueling the scrutiny of the so-called shadow docket. Okay, this is Supreme Court guys saying, here's what I'm going to do. Here's if this ever gets to me, you're going to get screwed. Here's what it is. Now, believe it, don't believe it. I don't know. I haven't gone far enough into it to find out whether I believe it or not. And in order to do that, I want to pull the whole story. But the news is out there. So this isn't me saying this. This is a summary from somebody else's reading of The Hill, which on its own I'm sure didn't interview John Roberts. So there's 16 pages of documents that were leaked that highlight deep ideological divides and concerns about a deteriorating culture regarding court confidentiality. Okay. The memos reveal, allegedly, that Chief Justice Roberts and other conservative judges pushed to halt the EPA's Clean Power Plan, which the Times described as Roberts acting like a bulldozer. The leak provides insight into the shadow docket the unexplained or quick decisions made by the court, and has intensified criticism from the left, highlighting how such decisions favor conservative policy goals. Well, they do the same thing in the other direction, and the Democrats would never, fight about that. But these things that occur, of course they occur. It's friggin' politics. It's a dirty freaking world, and don't act like they don't. If you think that federal judges don't understand their power, you better think again. They're basically untouchable. You can't do anything except bow down when you walk in their courtrooms. And I don't mean that horribly. You got to respect the position as a lawyer anyway. But don't go acting like you have any authority of any kind, and that they don't know what sort of authority that they do have. And they make their decisions, and it seems like the more blatant they are, the less anybody is going to screw with them. And don't kid yourselves that they're not also looking for the next position in the chain of command. That is what they are doing. They all dream to be next in line to be on an appellate court, and ultimately hope to be part of the Supreme Court. And so, trust me, it's political, and they want to be recognized. They also want to be known. And you think that lawyers aren't political? Ha! Yeah, good luck with that theory. But anyway, the impact, they say that this shadow docket impact has legal experts saying that the leak seems designed to embarrass the court right now and undermine trust in its proceedings, with some commentators urging an FBI investigation because of the leak. Now, I don't know who's right, who's wrong, don't really care. The issue for me is that the court is supposed to be, and this is what they hammer into your head all through law school. You can't say anything bad about the court. You can't say anything bad about a judge. You can't. And the way they define it in your civil procedure courses and in your constitutional law courses, well, it's a dirty, messy system, but it's the best in the world. That's it. That's your logic. It's a dirty, messy system, but it's the best in the world, and you have to change it from within. And they pound that into your head. They pound it into your head for a reason, so you don't ever come out and say anything negative. And if you go after the government, if you go after the system itself, you become the target. I'm a prime example of that. And you become the target for a-holes who believe in nothing but the system. And they don't even believe in that. They're just all powerful in the system. And so they just destroy people who threaten that system. And trust me, it happens. And it happens every day. It happens in Missouri pretty frequently. And it does occur. So these legal experts are saying that this information put out right now is designed to embarrass the court and undermine trust in the proceedings. And again, commentators are saying, hey, the FBI ought to jump in the court. Yeah, that's going to work. They do that. The court will figure out how to get them. Trust me on that one. So this 2022 Dobbs opinion leak and a smaller leak in 2024 to the exact same publication point to ongoing serious breaches of confidentiality. And the only way you can get the entire story is read it in the Hill, and I haven't been able to do that yet. So but the leak has occurred. And I'm going to have to dig in and get some of that. There's another blog from Slate, if you've ever heard of Slate. And here, there's something, I'm going to share this article. I don't know if I'll share the whole thing. It's far too long. But apparently, Slate has done a rewrite as well. And they have a related couple of stories in there. So I'm going to share these later, but that's on the news part that we do plan to and it has the documents in there, which, show John Roberts taking authority. We shall see what happens in those. And I'm truly interested in how that all pans the hell out. Okay. But I want to get back to where I was talking to talking about Nikol Pashinyan, who is Armenian leader, and Vladimir Putin in a formal, it's 15-minute, 20-minute statement between the two of them. And I could give the whole translation to you. It's not that long, and put it out there. But Putin especially, I may tell you a little bit about what he was talking about. He said that the most important thing in political processes, especially between the two countries, they're sharpened during election campaigns, is to not harm relations between Russia and Armenia. And we have discussed many times that Russia and Armenia have special relations formed not over decades, but over centuries. And we're united by shared history, joint problems, problem solving. Now, Armenia is right next to Georgia and Azerbaijan. And Georgia is so damn beautiful. I spent some time over there, not last fall, but was I in Georgia? 2 years ago, fall, August, September, and I went to Vladikavkaz, and I went in Russia, and I spent some time in Georgia during that 3-week trip, 4-week trip, 2 weeks in each place, and it was really pretty cool. And Georgia's a great place. Armenia is right next door. Now, you watch a lot of movies at least I do anyway, that are in Russian, but a lot of them, when they travel south, when they travel, they go down to Sochi, and they travel down to the beaches in Sochi, or they go across to Armenia, and those are far more Muslim, and they can even go down as far as Azerbaijan and those things when it was the Soviet Union. So traveling, they would all go down. There was plenty of travel between the two. And the same thing with Georgia. There's a large Russian population in Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And in Armenia has some pretty good stuff. And I'm going to share a song from one of the movies that I just love from that time period. And I'll share you a song from that just later. But he talked a little bit about the economy, between the two countries, Vladimir Vladimirovich, and he said trade reached about 11 billion previously, and about 6.4 to 6.5 billion, and in comparison with Azerbaijan, they're under 5 billion, and that says something because in order, they have to have a rail through Azerbaijan to get to Armenia. And 1.2 billion is Armenian agriculture exports that Russia purchased. They have ongoing discussions about developing ties with the European Union. Does Armenia? And Putin is saying, membership in both a customs union with the EU and the Eurasian Economic Union are pretty much impossible by definition. It's not political, it's economic, he said. Standards differ. Tariffs market across rules of engagement. These differences require years of harmonization. Even before the Ukraine crisis, we attempted cooperation with the EU, said Putin, and nothing came of it. Their position is always extremely rigid. On energy, gas prices in Europe are about $600 per 1,000 cubic meters. And from Russia, we supply the same thing to Armenia at $177.50 per 1,000 cubic meters, and that is a substantial difference. And it really is. They pay 4 times as much if they're going to get it from Europe than if they get it from Russia, because in Europe it all comes to the U.S. anyway, or different pipelines come in different places, but they pay 4 times as much if you're in Armenia. Armenia's exports to the EU have grown tenfold in years. Ultimately, it's a sovereign decision on how to build your economy. He said the most sensitive issue remains Nagorno-Karabakh. After Armenia recognized Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan in Prague in 2022, it's inappropriate for the Security Conference to intervene, since it is now an internal Azerbaijani matter. Now, thanks to efforts by the Azerbaijani president and Armenia and U.S. involvement, relations are stabilizing. He threw a little hat tip to Trumpster for helping resolve that. Remember, the Armenian president and the Azerbaijani president both visited the White House different times. was it last year before? No, it had to be last year because it was after Trumpster came into office. So the issue shouldn't be politicized too much. Well, then Pashinyan gets on and he says, well, our relationships with Russia are deep and very important. They're developing under new regional realities, particularly now that we have peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And it was only when I was over there in Georgia, which is right next door to both of these countries, that we were told we couldn't get into Azerbaijan because I wanted to go, but I couldn't go there. And I couldn't really, it wasn't necessarily a good time to go to Armenia either because both of those two countries were at each other's throats. And I do kind of pay attention when I go over there. And so we elected not to go to those. But my goal was to go into there and go into Russia through a roundabout way, through Azerbaijan and through Armenia and, get to Russia and go to Vladikavkaz that way. But I only ended up doing Georgia and Vladikavkaz, so two countries, and I have to knock those other two off my list at another time. I'm thinking about going to Sochi because Sochi's right next door to them too, and you could take a boat over to one of them and then go in the other. It'd be kind of cool. So anyway, the Armenian and the he talked about the concerns, did Pashinyan, about the CSTO. And in 2022, there was a situation where the mechanism should have worked, but they didn't. That's why they approached Trump to help them get rid of the war, because it didn't really work with the CSTO, which is a security organization between Southeast Asian states, including Russia. And on domestic politics, Armenia is a democratic country. Elections happen frequently. We have a decent amount of political activism here in our country. Relationship with Russia has endured many tests. We're open with dialogue, blah, blah, blah. And I'm confident that in the election, Armenia will strengthen further its ties with Russia. There's still many untapped. So the strategic summary of all this between the two, this was not small talk. This was two guys fighting it out diplomatically like a decent lawyer would do, where they point out the pros and the cons, and then they get to it. So Putin's position is that Russia is offering some tangible benefits: cheap gas, trade access, labor migration. EU alignment comes with regulatory incompatibility and long-term friction. And the security reality is once Armenia recognized Karabakh as Azerbaijani, Russia's hands basically were tied militarily. They couldn't come in and support. So there's a subtle pressure about pro-Russian political actors. Now, they talked about the pipelines going through Azerbaijan in a lot of places and into Armenia, and that's no longer an issue for getting cheap Russian gas, and they can still get cheap Russian gas, and they acknowledge the incompatibility. So Pashinyan acknowledged the long-term incompatibility with the EU, but he said, the CSTO failed in 2022, and but he's open to non-Russian energy and nuclear partners. And nuclear, Russia can build them a nuclear power plant far cheaper than anybody in the EU, but who knows, what they're going to do. The underlying reality is Armenia is doing the same as a lot of countries are trying to do. And trust me, there's been a lot of NATO and U.S. and NGO activism in all those areas. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, any of the stands over there, and then Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and those places, huge amounts of impact from and non government organizations attacking over there and trying to get these guys to toe the anti-Russia line, just like in Ukraine. So it's a classic geopolitical maneuvering, and the smaller state wants to keep both doors open, and a major power is politely explaining that eventually one door or the other you're going to have to close, and we hope it's the EU door because it makes a lot more sense for you to be with us. And it really does, truthfully, but who knows what will happen. I was talking to you about I want to put this song in. The song I'm going to play for you is called Chito Gvrito, and it's a Soviet-era film from Mimino, and it's sung by a guy named Vakhtang Kikibidze, a Georgian performer who was just loved across the Soviet Union, and leaders who couldn't stand each other paused to honor him when he died. And Mamino itself is just a wonderful little story. It's a Caucasus parable, a Georgian pilot. He pilots a helicopter. He can fly planes too, but he's a helicopter pilot. An Armenian companion. He's got a woman there. He's got Moscow in the middle. He's got a pilot's license and he wants to do more. The opening scene is him coming in his big helicopter, and somebody has a goat in the back seat. And by the way, that's the way it used to be. I flew on an Aeroflot flight and a guy came in, this is in the 90s, and a guy gets on, he's like from Azerbaijan or something like that, and he had these big billowy pants on, and it was pretty cool. And he sits down right next to me in the front of the airplane, and I was sitting there, and I was going from Moscow to Moldova, to Chisinau, and he was going to Chisinau too. And where I don't know if the plane was going somewhere else later. There were no stops on the way. It was just straight over, and he sits down next to me, and he's got a pair of these boots that go up to his knees, and they're pretty cool. He's got the billowing silkish style pants, and he's got a big shirt and a big broad belt on. It's like, geez, I'm sitting next to some guy who I don't know what came out of a Azerbaijani Arabic Muslim something story, Arabian Nights or something. And he's sitting down next to me, and I'm trying to ignore, and somebody else comes by carrying a crate full of chickens. They got a crate, like 6 chickens in there, this crate. Another guy comes in carrying a bale of cotton. A bale. You got this big whole plane. I'm like, where am I? And it was an Aeroflot flight from Moscow to Chisinau in Moldova. And anyway, I'm sitting next to a guy. It's not that long a flight, 3-4 hours maybe. And so I'm dozed off. I'm there in a suit, for God's sake. I got a suit coat on, and I'm sitting next to this Arab dude wearing some stuff. All of a sudden, he taps me, and I look over, and he reaches in his boot, and I swear to God, the guy pulled out like an 8-inch curved knife. Like, it looked like a mini scimitar, right? He's got this huge knife that he just pulls out of his boot, and then he reaches into a pouch in the front of his outfit. He's got like a little fanny pack of some sort. It wasn't, but he's got this thing, and he pulled it out, and he pulled out a tomato, and he started slicing tomatoes, and he handed me a couple of chunks of tomato, and we spoke a little bit in Russian. We had a little bit of fun. His Russian was terrible, and but he tried to talk to me, and anyway, it was an interesting flight, but it was pretty. The only reason I share that story is because I liked this film was called Mimino. And Mimino is, everybody loved it in the Soviet Union. And how do you not? It's a story of a guy who's a pilot in Georgia, flying and doing carrying friggin' goats and chickens and stuff in the back of his helicopter, which seats about eight people back there, and people would fly, and then he'd fly into his little village in Georgia, but then he would go to bigger places every once in a while. And one of them, in the first part of the show, he runs into some pilots that he went to school with, and they got all these stewardesses hanging about with him, and they're talking about the plane that they're flying, and they're off to Western Europe somewhere, and they're talking about stories, and he has one of the girls that he is speaking with, and he says, oh, he's a pilot too, and then he gets embarrassed. Anyway, long and the short of the story is he goes to Moscow, has adventures, becomes a pilot for a year or two, and in the end, he ends up going back home. It's a cool story. He goes back home, and the girl of his dreams and stuff, she doesn't want to leave Georgia or anything like that, and so that's what they do, and it's actually pretty cool. So, a decent story, and from it, in the beginning of the show, is something called Chito Gavrito. And I always like this song, and so I'm going to share it with you just because. And then, but I want to do that before we do it. We're going to put the map on the table. The South Caucasus are between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Georgia borders Russia to the north and the northeast, Azerbaijan to the east and the southeast, and Armenia and Turkey to the south. And the Black Sea is to the west. So Armenia is kind of landlocked. It borders Georgia and Azerbaijan, and Iran to the southeast, Turkey to the west, and Azerbaijan enclave of Nakhchivan to the southwest. The Georgia is not trivia, it's destiny. Georgia has a Black Sea opening and direct border with Russia. Armenia does not border Russia at all, but they reach Russia through Georgia. And for decades, the western route has been structurally choked by the closed Turkish frontier. And the closed Turkish border is one of the great stubborn facts of the modern Caucasus. Reuters said last year that Turkey has closed its border to Armenia in 1993 in support of Azerbaijan during Nagorno-Karabakh. And although there have been attempts at normalization, Armenia and Turkey still have no formal diplomatic relations. So whenever people in Washington or Brussels talk breezily about Armenia pivoting west, they're skipping over the plain mechanical problem. Armenia is not Estonia. It is a small, mountainous, landlocked state with a shut western frontier and a bad news on the eastern frontier and no direct EU border. So if you want to sell Europe to these guys, which, they're still trying to explore, you have to do it through Turkey. And you have to do it through some sort of corridor, permissions, rail gauge, custom rules with neighbors that you don't like. So that's why the railway question matters so much in the Putin-Pashinyan exchange. It isn't about symbolism, it's about steel tracks and leverage, because they can work with Russia through Georgia, and Georgia has a reasonably good relationship with Russia right now, although Trump's trying to kick both of those out. So just so you know where you are on the world. So, and that has kind of always been that way. When you talk about Nagorno-Karabakh, you have to go back there. This has been a predominantly ethnic Armenian region, internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan now. The dispute goes back to the Soviet collapse, and then it was decades of war, ceasefire, frozen conflict, renewed war, and finally Azerbaijan restored military control in 2023, and that was the exodus of the region's Armenian population. 2025, Trump brokered a deal that was presented as a turning point toward normalization after 4 decades of conflict. So this is Putin's comments. He isn't just talking about abstract diplomacy, he's talking about an Armenia that's already accepted in practical terms that Karabakh is no longer a military reversal project. They can't change it. It's Azerbaijan, period, end of sentence. So that's a war. Who is the UN all talked about, territorial integrity. Yeah, right. That's what happened in Serbia. That's what happened in Kosovo, and that's what happened in Azerbaijan and Armenia. So the deal with the abbreviation, that the Collective Security Treaty Organization was a Russian-led Soviet military bloc, including Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, and Tajikistan. It's Moscow's answer to the Security Alliance framework, but not with NATO's credibility, I suppose. And in September 22, Azerbaijani attacks on the sovereign Armenian territory, Armenia invoked Article 4, a collective defense, and the CSTO did hold an extraordinary session at Armenia's request. It sent a mission, it talked, but what it did not do was provide military backing Armenia thought it should get. Armenia officials later said CSTO had unclear positions and that Prime Minister Pashinyan said the mechanisms had failed Armenia in 2021 and 22. That's what he was talking about when he said it was a CSTO failure. So Putin says, well, to be honest, once you recognize Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan, CSTO intervention is improper. And he made a legal argument. But Pashinyan said he's talking about their internationally recognized territory of 2022, not simply Karabakh. And he's saying they should have come in to get something, and they got a little sloppy about it. It never occurred. Anyway, culturally, I want to pull you back to the Georgian pilot, which is a pretty cool story, and I'm going to give you a little bit of culture now from that point of view. And this is Chito Gvrito, and I always enjoyed this song. Couldn't tell you why, I just do. And so I'm going to share it with you if I can find it. Oh, it's the last one, not the first one. That's why I had to go through each and every one. But here it is. Enjoy, please. Chito Grito. It's a fragment from the film Mimino.
მაინც ამღერი მერა მომღერებს ვარდების უთქვა ხაჩოს ფერი ალბათ სიმღერა თუ დამანახლეს ხოდა მეწმღერი ჩიტო გორიტო ჩიტო მარგარიტო და ჩიტო გორიტო ჩიტო მარგარიტო და ჩემი სიმღერა ამზე მომხალხმა ამზე სამშობა როსამღერიბა შორიდან მათაბობს ჩემი ბავშვობა როსამღერიბა მე ჩემს მომავალ სიბერეს ხედა დაუკითხავად გულში შემოდის ფარული სევდა ჩიტო გორიტო ჩიტო მარგალიტო და ჩიტო გორიტო ჩიტო მარგალიტო და ჩემი სიმღერა ხებმა მასწავლეს ჩიტების ტვენა ასე მგონია ამ სიმღერებით ავიდგიენა როგორც ამბობენ სიცოცხლის ბოლოს თუ მღერის გედი სიმღერით მოკვდე რაღაცა დრო ამაზე მეტი
I don't know why. I just like that song, and I always have. And as soon as I heard it in the movie, it's like, I'm going to have to put that in a playlist somewhere. And I found it and put it in. It's called Chito Gavrito, Chito Margarito Da. And that is actually Georgian, and it's from the film Mimino, where a Georgian pilot, dreams of something bigger in his life. And if you read some of the commentary in songs like that, or if you read into it after that movie, those type of movies just don't exist anymore. They just don't. And it was a pretty cool movie. And I challenge you to find it in English. Even so, it's a more of a moral story at the end. Home is better, blah blah blah, and that kind of thing. But it's a cool story, a film with a lesson, let's say, that many of us have, never learned about, apparently, because we go all over the place, and there's home doesn't really exist for some of us, and we just live where we live, and I've never really established a place that I'd necessarily called home until I moved to Missouri. In 2001, I never lived anywhere longer than 3 years, 4. No, that's not true. I lived in Minnesota for 5 when I was a kid. But my father was in transportation, and so our family moved around a lot. And I was in the military, and I moved around a lot. I was in Dallas for law school for about not quite 5 years as well. And then came to Missouri in 2000, mid-2000. And I suppose if I had to call a place home, it'd be Missouri. But I'm not. I don't know. People ask you, where are you from? Well, shit, I was born in Cincinnati, but there you have it. Anyway, there's plenty more to go into that I wanted to get into, especially about the further discussions. And after we get there, we'll play a little bit more music for you and talk about some more about Armenia. So let's get out of the Caucasus, and we're going to move now into, I played the Chito Gvrito, and what the Caucasus story tells us, we're going to move to Germany next, is like this. Russia is stopping the transit of Kazakh oil to Germany's Schwedt refinery via the Druzhba pipeline starting in May. Okay, and it does hit a major fuel artery for Berlin, an immediate public rationale from Moscow. So the whole world is revolving around energy right now. Trump's trying to take over energy in Venezuela and in Iran. EU is scrambling to cover where it's. I read a report yesterday that is actually pretty cool. The Canadians are trying to open a northern sea route that doesn't have to go through Hudson Bay, and has to go through instead. The American side doesn't have to. No American port touching anything coming out of Canada. They're opening their own northern Arctic route to Europe, and they're going to start supplying fuel, which right now has to come through the U.S. And so they've announced this thing. It's billions of dollars to winterify, I suppose you'd call it, this northern port in Canada, and have icebreakers that escort and take people across the ocean to the EU countries without any dealing with the United States. So this is both the EU and Canada avoiding America intentionally. It makes much more sense, and they can get much more money straight dealing with the EU. You wonder if they'll use American dollars to get that done. That's just a wonder from me. And so there's all kinds of juggling everywhere. What did Putin talk about with Pashinyan? He talked about oil. He talked about infrastructure. And the war and coming, the economic wars will be around long after these attempts at domination by the powerful, by the Americas of the world, or by Russia trying to force something or convince Armenia that they need to do something, right? And Canada's, we're going to avoid America entirely and work straight with the EU, and vice versa. They're going to have back and forth between their ports, cutting out America. That's the part that's important to me, is we're being cut out in a lot of places. And we've used our position to dominate to no one's advantage but our own, not even thinking of the other sides, with force, with power, and, well, we're the largest economy in the world. You have to deal with us. Well, they're telling us that they don't in a lot of different ways. A lot of people are saying it, too. Canada, after the speech of Carney recently, said, we're getting alternatives. They're dealing with China directly. That's another way of the northern strait, the northern sea through the Arctic. Why do you think Donald Trump, who knows this, wants Greenland, Canada, and Alaska? He wants all those, and he wants more. But the Caucasus story that I just related to you, and the German story that I'm giving you, is geography still rules, pipelines still rule, rails still rule, and all the speeches in Brussels and Washington don't move a barrel of oil until somebody controls the infrastructure and the map. And in Armenia, Putin was saying to Pashinyan that history and logistics still matter more than Western slogans, democracy, blah, blah, blah. In Germany, Moscow is now making the same point, but more harsh. Energy routes are still used like a wrench across European machinery, whether you like it or not. So starting May 1st, Kazakh oil, Russia is cutting it off. You can't do so. The issue with the Druzhba pipeline, and one of the reasons that Viktor Orban got booted by his electorate in Hungary is because the Druzhba pipeline, allegedly Ukraine destroyed it so that Russia couldn't get fuel to Hungary, so that Orban would be forced to agree to the 90 billion that the EU that he was vetoing to go to the corrupt hellhole of Zelensky's regime, right? And now that Orban is gone, the Druzhba pipeline was fixed in a matter of a week because as the new Magyar leader of Hungary said, open it up or we're in the same boat. And so Druzhba was repaired. Ukraine said it's repaired. Well, and then the leader of Hungary is off to Brussels to give his approval so that the Ukrainians can get this 90 billion to continue fighting the Russians. Meanwhile, Russia, who supplies oil and allows that same pipeline to carry Kazakh oil to go through the pipeline to Germany in a different section, now says, now that we can get Russian oil through the Druzhba pipeline to Hungary, you won't buy Russian oil? Screw you. We're not going to allow our share of the pipeline to transport Kazakh oil. They're sanctioning in reverse and saying you then can't have Kazakh oil through the Druzhba pipeline. Germany, to go to the Schwedt refinery in Druzhba beginning on May 1, 2026. And that's a major fuel artery for Berlin that carries about 20% of the fuel necessary for that part. However, it's a bite, and it's also another punch in the face because that same refinery is 54% owned, 54.17 is legally owned. Of that refinery is owned by Russia's Rosneft, Russian oil company, state-owned oil company. It's a big deal. And it owns more than half of this plant. And so Germany says it's going to get the alternative, and they took it and put it in receivership and have been operating it anyway. They're trying to steal the pipeline and say it doesn't matter, you own 54%, or not the pipeline, the refinery. And so they're taking that, and so they're going to get their alternatives through Gdansk or Rostock. And the prices are going to still kick them in the butt. They'll at least have a different, and they're under a trusteeship. Germany has kept the refinery in a trusteeship. So, you know, if we go from these beautiful songs and mountains to pipelines and refineries, the political class like to talk about values, but in winter, what are they going to talk about if the gas isn't flowing? Gas usually gets the last word, and there's another collision between Russia and Germany, and this one is not with tanks, it's a Druzhba pipeline. And the PCK refinery in Schwedt, with 100 kilometers from Berlin, supplies most of the fuel used in the German capital and in the Brandenburg region. Reuters reports that from May 1, Russia's going to stop the Kazakh oil through there. Why was Germany using Kazakh oil in the first place? Because after the 2022 political break with Moscow, Berlin moved away from direct Russian crude, and Schwedt has historically been built around Russian pipelines. But once Germany decided it wanted to turn the tap off from Russia, it had to find replacement, and one fix was to bring in Kazakh oil through the very same Russian-controlled transport architecture. And that was always a strange arrangement. Russia providing oil to Germany, but not our oil. It's Kazakh oil. Germany wanted not Russian oil, but the route still depended on Russia and a Russian-controlled pipeline. Where's the logic in that? In other words, Berlin is trying to quit one habit, but still buying cigarettes from the same shopkeeper, right? So you get rid of your Marlboros and you move over to Salem, yeah? That arrangement might have worked for a while, but it had a built-in weakness. Moscow can turn off the route, and then now they have. So the official line, Russian Deputy Minister Alexander Novak said the halt was due to technical possibilities, and Kazakhstan's energy minister also discussed the disruption and talked about recent attacks and infrastructure problems in Kazakhstan. But Reuters separately reported that Russia's oil output was hurt in April by Ukrainian drone strikes. So there's a real infrastructure disruption backdrop. And it's not just Russia. It's not just Kazakhstan. It's Iran. It's all of the Gulf states. There's serious problems. There's no reason to be naive about this. When Russia said it lacks the technical possibility to move oil in a direction that hurts Germany, but flows are fine in other directions that help Hungary and Slovakia, the technical explanation, are, not necessarily the same as the political necessity of doing it. So the timing is also pretty interesting. On the same day, Reuters reported that Russian oil resumed flow again through the Ukrainian section toward Hungary and Slovakia. Reuters reported that Hungary's position on the 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine shifted and unblocked the package. The restart of that line matters because energy transit and EU bargaining are now entangled. So you wind up with a pretty interesting picture. One part of Druzhba reopens in a way to keep Hungary and Slovakia supplied and clears an EU financing obstacle, but another part is effectively shut down for Germany's benefit via the Kazakhstan barrels. That's not pipeline maintenance, it's a chess with energy, right? So Schwedt itself, this is important because the refinery is the story. PCK Schwedt is not some obscure industrial outpost. Reuters repeatedly describes it as supplying most of Berlin's fuel. Historically, 90% of the German capital's fuel came through Schwedt, which is almost 55% owned by Russia. That means whenever Schwedt is pressured, the consequences travel fast into transport, pricing, supply, and public nerves. When the government says there's no supply risk, that usually means, translated into ordinary talk for ordinary folk, we think we can keep the lights on, but it's going to cost more, take rerouting, and involve some improvisation. Government rarely announce a problem and go, yeah, it's fine. Don't please ignore, the smoke. There's no fire over there. What are you talking about? The ownership structure is, from Moscow's point of view, Rosneft still owns 54.17% of Schwedt. And even though Germany puts Rosneft's local subsidiaries under state trusteeship, in plain terms, Russia's flagship oil company still has a legal stake in the facility, but Berlin controls it administratively to protect its own supply and keep politics from blowing up the refinery operation. Because, trust me, Russia would shut it down in a heartbeat if they hadn't stolen it. So they put it in this trusteeship and are running. There's all kinds of scams going on and pulling the money from Russia. So Reuters reports in 2025 that Germany extended the trusteeship again, while Rosneft sought a sale of their portion. So think about the picture. Germany's trying to run a vital refinery without relying on Russian crude, while the largest shareholder is still Russian, and the replacement oil still runs through Russian-controlled transport. It's crazy. Now, can Germany replace the missing barrels? Probably on paper. Poland's pipeline operator, Pern, said it prepared to route oil for Schwedt non-Russian shareholders through port of Gdansk, non-Russian shareholders. Germany's economy ministry pointed to alternatives via Gdansk or Rostock, but these alternatives aren't magic. Port, shipping schedules, pipelines, inland transfer capacity, terminal availability, storage balances, refinery blending, all really matter. And Reuters notes that logistics takes time, and even if Berlin avoids a dramatic shortage, regional prices are going to be hiked. And that's the difference between a talking point and a supply chain. When a politician says, we have alternatives, it's like, fine, but how much are they going to cost? And how long is it going to take you to get it? And there's another player that shouldn't be ignored in this story. It's Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan has been building up its exports to Germany through Druzhba. Reuters reports that in 2025, Kazakhstan delivered 2.146 million metric tons to Germany through that route, up sharply from the year before. And in Q1 2026, it already supplied 730,000 tons. That means Kazakhstan was trying to prove it could serve Europe as non-Russian source, even while using Russian transit infrastructures. Moscow's decision reminds Kazakhstan of a hard truth. Central Asian producers may sell non-Russian oil and gas, but if the transport remains in Russian control, Moscow still has its fingers on the valve. So this is not only pressure to Berlin, it's a signal to Astana. Do not confuse ownership of crude oil with control of the route, and that's what makes this so important beyond Germany. Iranian oil? Fine, don't buy it. But how are you going to get it out of the Straits of Hormuz, right? You want to buy U.S. gas? Great. But how are you going to get it across the ocean to Europe or anywhere else? Venezuelan oil? Fine. How are you going to buy it if the U.S. blocks the way? This is all about energy infrastructure. The entire world conflicts. This is all energy, just like it was when Bush claimed there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that we had to take down. Right? And when they lied to us about that, Germany, for its part, thought it had cleverly replaced Russian crude with Kazakh crude, and Moscow's answer is, okay, nice, still our pipe. That's a kind of lesson great powers like to teach because it lands hard. It's one thing to sanction Russia on paper. It's quite another to discover that your replacement system still is owned by Russia, passing through Russian-controlled infrastructure. So Europe keeps trying to build a post-Russia energy order while still dragging around chunks of the old Russian energy order like a ball and chain. And so they can't get... how long is it going to take them to build this Arctic route with Canada? Years. And then they may be able to replace, but in the meantime, they're up for some energy problems in Europe. So the Poland angle is also worth dwelling on because Poland sits between Germany's emergency and the politics of a broader eastern flank. In late 2022, Reuters reported that Germany and Poland agreed to work on securing crude supply to Schwedt after Russian oil was being phased out. Russia has pushed that up. That was supposed to be 2030. That was the emergency scaffolding. Now in 2026, the Gdansk route is again central, but using Poland as a rerouting lifeline is not elegant or cheap. And it's not stable at all. It adds a maritime dependency, terminal pressures, and political coordination. Poland can help, but Poland isn't a fairy godmother. It's a state with its own infrastructure limits, costs, strategic priorities. So there are alternatives, but these are going to be vulnerabilities as well. So let's talk about the great strategic move, because I think it seems to be a good move on Russia's part. If Russia wants maximum pain with minimum drama, this is like a textbook move. It doesn't openly cut off all energy to Germany. Excuse me. It doesn't create an instant apocalyptic shortage. Instead, it removes a meaningful slice of the supply. It's a politically symbolic refinery. It's like a thumb in the eye. It's not the end of the world, but we've exposed the weakness of Germany's substitute architecture. We've pressured Kazakhstan, reminded Europe that replacement logistics are frail, and all doing this while citing a technical reason rather than an economic warfare. And that's smarter than throwing a tantrum. And it's a pressure test. And by the way, how's Zelensky going to turn off Druzhba? And I'm worried about that, frankly. Once he receives his $90 billion, does he go right back to being the a-hole and turning off the stuff for Hungary, just to stick it to them until Russia restores it to Germany? Don't know, but nobody wants oil from Russia, remember? Germany isn't being squeezed in a vacuum. Last week, Reuters reported that Germany under Merz has become Ukraine's top European military supporter. $55 billion in aid, since 2022, and further support pledged. It matters because every energy move is in a broader position. And there's a question about whether Germany can simply shrug and say, fine, we're done with Russian anything, like they're trying to. Maybe eventually, but they can't do it instantly, at least not without great cost. And the European refining margins are already negative because of competition and market strain, and the refineries are priced and the fuel prices are high. That means Schwett isn't operating in a relaxed market where everybody can reorder, and just have a different meal on the buffet. The broader environment is already tight and expensive. A disruption in crude routing is much nastier than the same disruption would have been years ago. It's the difference between missing a bus on a sunny afternoon and missing a bus at midnight in the freezing rain. So the first, you catch on the basic story. Russia's choking in a German artery, and the move is strategically important. And second, the precise mechanism isn't that Moscow is cutting off Russian oil to Germany. However, it's halting the transit of some other country, Kazakhstan's crude to Germany through Druzhba, which hurts Schwett materially. And third, the restart of Druzhba flow through Ukraine toward Hungary and Slovakia and the clearing of the 90 billion Ukraine lane show that the pipeline flows in EU politics are still lashed together. And Rosneft, continuing stake in Schwett, talks about how incomplete Germany's separation is from Russian energy in reality. And Poland and Germany ports offer alternatives, but the alternatives aren't going to be comfortable. In the end, the big, beautifully connected in the Caucasus, Putin was telling Armenia the geography and infrastructure limit fantasies. And in Germany, Russia's saying the same argument with oil. And you can announce a new political era. You can wrap yourself in the EU. Geez, we love democracy, if you can call it that. You can sanction, posture, and moralize. But until you replace the old infrastructure with a new infrastructure that actually works, you're still living inside the physical system built by the old order. And Europe has been trying to escape Russia, and sometimes it succeeds. And it may ultimately succeed, but Russia's rebuilding toward the east and the south, and Europe is building to take stuff through the Baltics and American and Chinese, Canadian oil. In other words, that might be the real lesson of Druzhba, which means friendship. In 2026. The friendship in the pipeline name died long, long ago, but the structure remains, and the structure is outliving the slogan. Germany wanted post-Russian energy without fully post-Russian routing. Kazakhstan wants European access without escaping Russian transit leverage. And how are they going to do that? They can't. The EU wanted to bankroll Ukraine while juggling Hungarian Russian fuel through the pipeline. And Russia, in one move, has reminded all of them that steel valves, ports, and geography still control. And in politics, people talk about values, but in energy, the map is what controls. Values do not. So there you have it. I've got a few more things, but before I get to it, I want to add for you another song from a movie. It's called Когда весна идет, не знаю. When is spring coming? And the cold people in Germany, Ukraine, and other places that don't have any gas supply really want to know. And this is from Vesna na Zarechnoy Ulica, which is spring on River Street. And the song is When Will Spring Come? I Don't Know. And it's a kind of a love song, and it's a cool song. Who is the guy who sings this? Nikolai Rybnikov, and he's also a star in the movie, and he sings it, and it is a tasty song of a good version and a life long gone in the Soviet Union, and I hope you enjoy it. I do, and so there you have it. Have a listen.
Когда весна придет, не знаю, пройду дожди, сойдут снега, но ты мне улица родная, и в непогоду дорога. На этой улице подросткам гонял по крышам голубей. И здесь, на этом перекрестке, с любовью встретился своей. Теперь и сам не рад, что встретил. Моя душа полна тобой. Зачем, зачем на белом свете есть безответная любовь? Зачем, зачем на белом свете есть безответная любовь? Когда на улице Заречной в домах погашены огни, горят мартеновские печи, и день и ночь горят они. Я не хочу судьбу иную мне ни на что не променять, ту заводскую проходную, что в люди вывела меня. На свете много улиц славных, но не сменяю адрес я. В моей судьбе ты стала главной, родная улица моя. В моей судьбе ты стала главной, родная улица моя.
Nikolai Rybnikov sang a song, good song. I like it. And so there you have it. We're going to try to make it move a little bit with the next song. We'll give you something a little bit more upbeat. But that was a love song of a guy who couldn't get the girl that he wanted to notice him. In a very famous song, very well thought of in Soviet era, and also now for those who look back upon history. It's like having cool stuff in ours. You go to your Elvis Presley movies. There are a lot of plenty good things in there too. Good stuff. I like it a lot. And so there you have it. We're gonna move on to talk about this, one more layer that under the surface. Over the past year, Ukrainian forces have dramatically expanded their use of long-range drones inside of Russian territory, particularly targeting oil infrastructure, refineries, storage depots, export terminals. And they haven't been symbolic. They've caused real disruption to Russian processing capacity and logistics. Russian officials point to infrastructure damage and technical limitations when explaining the reductions in their own throughput. So these drones are Ukrainian operated, but European countries, Germany in particular, are among Kiev's largest supporters in funding equipment and advanced system, including components that fall into the dual-use category, which include the drones. This doesn't mean that Berlin is launching drones into Russia, but you're hearing increasing rhetoric that, hey, Germany, hey, France, hey, England, you keep supplying these drone parts that are being used to target us, and we're going to consider the factories that you are producing them in as legitimate targets. We're going to attack your soil. And then last week, they published a list of all the companies and their locations and addresses that were supplying drone parts or drones to Ukraine, and saying, well, here's a list of potential targets. And people going, that's secret information. Well, not secret anymore. Russia put it out. But Western support is part of the ecosystem that enables Ukrainians' operational reach to get into Russian oil. And so, from Moscow's perspective, that distinction matters less than Brussels might hope. So when you see Russia halt oil transit that affects Germany while citing a technical strain tied to recent disruption, especially in Iran, especially through Ukraine blowing up pipelines, you don't have to leap into a conspiracy theory to see the connection. It's not really a straight line. It's a pressure system. Ukrainian strikes degrade the infrastructure. That creates a constraint. Those constraints are then selectively applied in ways that maximize its own political and economic leverage. And if Germany happens to be a key backer of Ukraine and also a vulnerable endpoint in the pipeline, it's not unreasonable to see how those pieces go together. Not as a single coordinated event, but part of a broader pattern of energy, infrastructure, and war are now completely intertwined. So, is it possible that Russia is responding to drone strikes? Sure, it's probable even. But is it provable as the direct reason that Druzhba is being disrupted into Germany only? No, not totally. But it makes sense. And so, I don't know. If you talk about Ukraine, power, and money in this question, there's a final layer, and it takes us right into Kiev, Brussels, and the uncomfortable territory of war, politics, and money. We have a situation where a massive European financial package, $90 billion in long-term support, is moving toward Ukraine at the same time that critical infrastructure like the Druzhba pipeline is suddenly functioning again in a way that cleared the political obstacle inside the European Union. Hungary was one of the most major holdouts, and once energy flow is stabilized and internal EU negotiations have shifted, the resistance appears to have softened. But those two things, whether they're directly connected or not, or just aligned, is up for debate. But the alignment is definitely real, and it definitely matters. But if you go to Ukraine's internal situation, President Zelensky is in power under extended martial law. He was supposed to be gone in May 2024. He's now 2 years over. He has now been renewed multiple times, and under Ukrainian law, elections are effectively suspended, which is the formal justification. But here's why the tension continues to build. The longer the corrupt Zelensky regime stays in power, and the more longer this continues, the more it raises a structural question: at what point does emergency government or governance look like indefinite governance? There's no clear election timeline. Zelensky won't even mention it. No transitional roadmap, no physical mechanism for political reset. And at the same time, there's persistent discussion, some of it coming from, credible political circles, about potential leadership alternatives. One of them, and the frequently mentioned one, is Valery Zaluzhny, who built a strong reputation during the early phases of the war and has been removed from command by Zelensky, and then he was sent to England to be the ambassador. Well, that actually strengthened his popularity. His popularity domestically and internationally has made him a recurring figure in conversations about Ukraine's political future. There have also been discussions in Western policy circles, not always public, but not exactly entirely hidden, about leadership stability in Kiev, and people don't like Zelensky anymore. His popularity is not that great. So when you combine these three things, extended martial law, massive income support, and unresolved leadership, it's a situation that is quite skeptical to the rest of the world, right? Not because there's proof of any wrongdoing, although there's plenty in the workings of the Ukrainian people. There was an article that I read about undercover people. They got it on video of them taking stuff in the EU now. The structure itself is quite opaque. Large sums of money move in a system that isn't operating under normal accountability, and that's not conspiracy theory. That's recognition of the pattern and of reality. And so infrastructure, if you keep coming back to it, is one thing, the entire equation that cannot lie. The Druzhba pipeline was disrupted by Ukraine, then restored. Energy flows are constrained and then reopened. Political resistance in the EU was firm until it was softened. Funding is delayed, now it's advanced. None of it proves coordination, but it does show that energy, finance, and political decision-making are moving in parallel tracks, and those tracks intersect more often than officials are comfortable talking about. So when you wonder if some things could magically happen to the pipeline after the funds are received, there's no evidence to support a specific disruption is planned, but there's also a demonstrated pattern throughout the conflict that infrastructure is repeatedly used as leverage by multiple sides at moments of maximum strategic value. Pipelines aren't just pipes, they're negotiating tools. They're pressure valves. They are signals. In the middle of all of this, Ukraine, in a war, dependent on external financing, operating under emergency situation, and navigating real survival needs and realities of international power politics, they're definitely occurring. And Zelensky isn't simply a wartime leader. He's a central figure in a system where military necessity, political continuity, and financial dependency are all tied together. So in the end, the question isn't about whether any one event is a coordinated event. The question is whether the system as a whole is producing outcomes where war, money, and infrastructure keep aligning at exactly the moments when leverage is needed. Hello, Straits of Hormuz. And if that pattern continues, then what we are watching is not really chaos, it's structure and pressure on that structure. And structure, infrastructure especially, once you see it, is very hard to unsee. I mean, it's absolute, right? So, allegedly, the UAE has requested a bailout, some money from the U.S. And I'm going to play one more song before we get to that part, and I'll end the show on that. And we're going to play, this is a much more upbeat song, and it's a more modern song of Tatiana Kortikova that is a pretty cool love song, and it's called Odnovo. And I like the beat, and I hope you do too. It's a pretty, we're playing something that shouldn't be being played. There you have it. We got to get to Tatiana Kortikova. And we shall do that even now. Here she is. Tatiana Kortikova. Song is called Odnovo.
Раскудрявый синеглазый ходит, бродит под окном. Мне девчонки рассказали все истории о нем. Я сижу и все мечтаю про себя и про его. Ох уж и сама не знаю, сердце бьется от чего. Одного покажу я у его. Чё меня одну любил и все, и больше никого. Чё меня одно любил все, и больше больше никого. Одного попрошу я у его, чтоб меня одну любил и все, и больше никого. Чтоб меня одну любил и все, и больше никого.
Haha, you can't help but sing along to that song if you can do it. It's kind of hard to do, but you can do it. That is that. And so that was Tatiana Kortikova, and the song was Adnavo. And I actually happen to like it. So let's see. I was talking a little bit about Ukrainian theft. And Ukrainian, there's a story that came about. Ukrainians are stealing in the hopes of living in Dubai. The U.S. military official to an undercover journalist. Okay. So hidden camera footage shows discussion of rampant corruption in Kyiv, as well as in the Iran war and America's WMDs. A U.S. Army nuclear security official has reportedly described the rampant corruption he witnessed in Ukraine since the administration of U.S. President Barack Obama. The interview was released by a media group run by the controversial journalist James O'Keefe, whose mode of operation is to send reporters on dates with their targets to record candid conversations. He identified the subject as Andrew Hugg, H-U-G-G, the U.S. Army's Chief of Chemical and Nuclear Surety, a role tied to safety oversight rather than command of the U.S. nuclear apparatus. He's a branch chief, Nuclear and Chemical Security, U.S. Department of the Army. The undercover video, Hugg claimed he had lived in Ukraine and personally witnessed Kyiv officials plundering U.S. taxpayer money. Washington and Kyiv have consistently denied accusations of graft involving American aid programs. That government is so corrupt, he said, they stole our money. They just stole it and bought houses, cars, like $100,000 cars. If they can get themselves rich and go live in Dubai, they don't care about their people. This is Andrew Hugg, okay? Speaking of domestic issues, Hugg claimed that the U.S. still possesses nerve agents, referring to the U.S. Army chemist allegedly exposed to a chemical agent, and commented on the possible assassination of Iran's newly elected Supreme Leader. If he, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, doesn't change his ways, yes, they're going to kill him, he said, while dismissing civilian and child casualties in Iran as collateral damage. Hugg also disclosed details of the U.S. nuclear posture and described a rapid decision-making progress in which a launch could be triggered. If a Girl Scout gives you a message, if it passes all the checks, go. At one point in the conversation, Hugg ironically admitted to his undercover date, it's a date he's gone on, the easiest way to get intelligence is send a pretty girl to talk to a guy. And that's what they did to him. So after the video is released, Army spokesman Cynthia Smith reportedly told O'Keefe that Hugg had been placed on administrative leave, you think, while the service conducted what she called a thorough investigation. Several unconfirmed reports allege that Hugg had been escorted from the Pentagon. The new report follows a series of undercover stings by O'Keefe's outlet targeting government personnel. In January, a Secret Service agent assigned to Vice President J.D. Vance's detail was placed on leave after hidden camera footage showed him sharing sensitive protected information. Critics have long accused O'Keefe of using unethical methods and selectively editing his content to further conservative causes. In 2023, he parted ways with his former organization, Project Veritas, amid allegations of financial impropriety, and launched a new media group called OMG. So there you have it. We wonder what is going on in the world. But that was interesting. The old Trumpster has created, according to Politico, a naughty list who's naughty and nice. The White House has reportedly drawn up a NATO naughty and nice list, sorting member states into tiers as it considers how to reward countries that backed the U.S. war against Iran and punish those that did not. Santa Claus. According to Politico, you get a lump of coal. No, the internal paper was prepared ahead of NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte's recent trip to Washington. It reportedly lays out member contributions to the bloc and appears to reflect Pentagon rhetoric about model allies deserving special favor and others that face consequences. The administration has not publicly spelled out what punishments are going to be on the table, but officials cited by Politico said options could include shifting troops, scaling back exercises, or redirecting military cooperation away from the bad members and toward the more obedient ones. That will benefit countries like Poland and Romania, both seen as being in Trump's good graces. Poland hosts around 10,000 U.S. troops right now, and Romania's expanded Mikhail Gogolniceau Air Base has been singled out as a potential site that would take more American forces. For years, Trump has berated NATO members for allegedly not paying for their own defense, even as they pour billions upon billions into arming, financing, sustaining Kiev in its conflict with Russia. At the same time, many of those same governments invoke the specter of looming Russian threat to justify militarization and bigger, larger military budget, right? Now the split has widened over Iran. Spain was among the clearest holdouts. Britain and France were also reported to have rejected or stalled U.S. requests for support. Other states like Romania and Bulgaria were portrayed as more helpful with regard to basing our logistics. In practice, the reported naughty list would give Trump another way to hollow out NATO without formally quitting it and returning the treaty to a more openly transactional arrangement like Trump likes to do. Trump has made a little secret of his contempt for members he sees as freeloaders and cowards. Earlier this month, he blasted NATO over its reluctance to join the Iran fight, while Rutte again found himself trying to smooth things over after his last visit, where he was ridiculed for calling Trump daddy. And he should have been ridiculed for that. Oh, my. Let's see. Where else are we going here? Oh, yeah. This was important. The U.S. Navy Secretary departed. A guy named John Phelan left effective immediately yesterday. He stepped down in an abrupt move announced by the Pentagon with no explanation or indication that his exit was linked to the naval blockade of Iran. But Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell said the statement was that he was departing the administration at once and that Undersecretary Hung Chau would become acting Secretary of the Navy. On behalf of the Secretary of War, Department of War, we are grateful to Secretary Phelan for his service to the department and to the United States Navy. We wish him well. No reason was announced. He's a businessman and investor with no prior military service, and he was sworn in as 79th Secretary of the Navy. That's got to be offensive to all those who served in the Navy for so many years, and you take the position. You know, that's crazy. Sudden personnel change is a sensitive moment for U.S. in the Middle East, where Washington is maintaining a blockade. Confrontation in and around Straits of Hormuz. This guy was just a huge backer, lots of money to the Trump campaign. So the Post is not directly responsible for authorizing combat operations, which under U.S. law flow through the president, the defense secretary, and relevant combatant commanders. But the Navy Secretary oversees the Department of Navy's core affairs, meaning Phelan would have been involved in readiness, deployment, policy execution during the standoff with Iran. Chau, who had been serving as undersecretary, will now take over. Phelan has previously praised him as a key part of the department's effort to rebuild the warrior ethos. And the department is just weeks after Seth forced out Army Chiefs of Staff Randy George and two other senior Army generals in a Pentagon shakeup. And apparently there was a race and gender row that caused the previous ones. Randy George was dismissed after he clashed with the U.S. Secretary of War over promotions for black and female Army officers. The U.S. Secretary of War, Hegseth, fired, this is a week or two ago, fired Chief of Staff of the Army, Randy George, and he was the service's top uniformed officer in a lingering row over promotions linked to race and gender, said the New York Times. Hegseth reportedly dismissed 2 other generals in a purge that is undermining the war in Iran, allegedly. Sources familiar with the matter told the paper that Hegseth ordered George, a 61-year-old veteran who served both in Iraq and Afghanistan, to retire immediately, describing the move as rooted not in policy, but in the Secretary's long-running grievance with the Army and its leadership, and a troubled relationship with Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll. Hegseth didn't give a reason, previously vowed to defend the Department of Woke Culture and fight the practice of promotions based on race and gender. At the heart of the fallout was reportedly Hegseth's months-long campaign to remove 4 officers, 2 black men, 2 women, from a 1-star promotion list comprising roughly other 29 officers, most of them white men. Now, I don't know the truth of any of that, but that's in the story. According to the NYT, George and Driscoll pushed back, saying that officers with long records and exemplary service. About 2 weeks before he was fired, George reportedly sought a meeting with Hegseth to discuss the removals and what he viewed as unnecessary interference in Army personnel decisions. A request Hegseth declined. George had served as a senior military assistant to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin under the Biden administration. New York Times sources note that George and Driscoll had a tight partnership with Hegseth at the odds with them later. Hegseth can't fire Driscoll, an unnamed administration official told the Washington Post, so he's going to make his life hell. Hegseth also fired General Hodney, who headed the U.S. Army's Transformation and Training Command, and Major General William Green, Jr., the chief of chaplains. No reason was given for any of the firings. George's term was not due to end until 2027. According to the New York Times, as Army chief, he spearheaded initiatives aimed at fielding new drone technology, AI-powered targeting systems, while opposing a new light tank program, argued that it was too vulnerable to cheap UAVs. General Christopher Laniv, once Hegseth's top military aide, is expected to serve as the acting Army chief of staff. 'Tis indeed a crazy, mixed up, muddled up, shook up world, except for Lola. So what we're going to do now is, I think we got a little bit more. Where'd that one go? Did I delete it? Son of a nutcracker. I think I did. There's another song I wanted to play for you that comes from another Russian movie, and I think I shall. This one comes from Slogans Param, Ironia Sudby. So enjoy. Here it comes. And I'll be leaving after that. Have a good day. Tomorrow's Civic Outlaws.
Никого не будет в доме, кроме сумерек. Один зимний день в сквозном проеме незадернутых гордин, незадернутых гордин. Только белых мокрых комьев, быстрый промельк маховой, только крыши, снег, и кроме крыши снега никого, крыши снега никого. И опять зачертит иней, и опять завертит мной прошлогоднее уныние и дела зимы иной, и дела зимы иной. Но нежданно по портьере пробежит вторженье дрожь, тишину шагами меря, тишину шагами меря, тишину шагами меря, ты как будущность войдешь. появишься у двери в чем-то белом, без причуд, в чем-то впрямь из тех материй, из которых хлопья шьют, из которых хлопья шьют. Никого не будет в доме, кроме сумерек. Один зимний день в сквозном проеме незадернутых гордин, незадернутых